Welcome to The Explainer. You know, when a family separates, figuring out child custody is maybe the toughest thing they'll ever face. And in Maryland, the entire rulebook for how courts make that decision, it's about to get a major rewrite. So today, we're going to break down exactly what that means.
All right, so here's the plan. First, we're going to look at the old rules, to see why they needed to change in the first place. Then we'll dive into this new law, check out the 16 factors a judge has to consider now, and finally, we'll talk about what this all really means for families on the ground. Let's do it.
Okay, so to really get why this new law is such a game changer, you've got to understand the old system. And let me tell you, it was a system that wasn't exactly written down in one easy-to-find place.
So for decades, there wasn't one single law in Maryland that said, here's how you decide custody. Nope. Instead, judges had to rely on something called case law. And you can think of it like a patchwork quilt, really. It's a bunch of different rules and ideas stitched together over the years from lots of different court decisions.
So the guiding light was always what's in the best interests of the child. Sounds simple enough, right? But what does that actually mean in a courtroom? Well, for a long time, the answer came from this landmark case back in 1977, Montgomery County versus Sanders. And that case laid out a list of factors, things like how fit the parents are, what the child wants, all the stuff you see here, that judges would use as their playbook for almost 50 years.
Then, fast forward to 1986. Joint custody is becoming way more common. In a new case, Taylor versus Taylor comes along and adds another layer to the mix. It brought in a whole new set of things for judges to think about, like how close the parents live to each other and how their jobs might affect things. But there was one factor that the court said was absolutely critical, more important than anything else for joint custody to work: communication. The ability of the parents to actually cooperate.
So you can probably see the problem here, right? You've got rules from a case in 77, more rules from a case in 86. It's all scattered everywhere. The system was just confusing. Parents, and honestly, even some lawyers, had a tough time figuring out which rules applied to their situation. It was pretty clear that something had to give, and that's when lawmakers decided to step in.
And the solution they came up with is Senate Bill 548. It's been passed, it's been signed, and it's all set to go into effect on October 1st, 2025. And believe me, it's going to completely reshape how custody cases are handled in Maryland.
So what's the big idea behind this new law? Well, it does one really simple but incredibly powerful thing. It takes all those messy, unwritten rules from all those old cases, gives them a modern update, and puts them all together in one single law. For the very first time, the rulebook is written down, it's clear, and anyone can go and read it, not just lawyers and judges.
All right, so what exactly does a judge have to look at under this new law? Well, it all boils down to 16 specific factors. 16! That's the magic number. The new law lays out 16 specific factors that a court can now use as its official roadmap to figure out what's truly in a child's best interest. And if you look at this list, you'll see a huge chunk of these factors are all about the child's world. We're talking about their stability, their health, their emotional and physical safety, protecting them from conflict, and of course, their relationships, not just with their parents, but with siblings and other important people in their lives.
But it's not just about the child in isolation. The law also puts the parents' relationship under a microscope. It looks really closely at how they communicate, can they actually co-parent effectively? How are they going to solve disagreements down the road without just running back to court? It even digs into the specific roles each parent plays in the child's life. And it gets modern, too, including things we didn't think about as much in the 70s, like what happens if a parent is deployed in the military.
So we've got a new law, it's written down, it's clear. But what does this shift from that old, messy case law to a single statute, what does it actually mean in the real world for real families?
Okay, now this is really interesting. The new law gets super specific about a huge and often painful issue: moving. It says right here in the text that if one parent wants to move far enough away that the current custody schedule just won't work anymore, well, that move is automatically considered a material change in circumstances. What does that mean? It means the other parent gets a green light to go back to court and ask for a complete do-over of the custody arrangement. That's a big deal.
And this chart, it really lays it all out nice and simple. We're going from a confusing system buried in old court decisions to one single public law. But I want you to pay close attention to that very last row, because that's where the biggest practical change really lies. And this might be the single biggest change in the entire law: accountability. See, before, a judge could make a decision and didn't necessarily have to explain how they weighed every single little factor. Not anymore.
Now, they are required to go on the record and explain their thinking for each and every one of these 16 factors. That brings a level of transparency to these decisions that we've just never had before.
So at the end of the day, Maryland now has a clear, consistent, and accountable rulebook for what is often a very painful process. The hope, of course, is that this makes things more predictable, more fair for families caught in the middle. But it does leave us with one last big question. Having a clear law is without a doubt a good thing. But can any law, no matter how perfectly it's written, ever make what is probably the toughest decision in family court any easier?